And I'm sorry, and James, I'm going to disagree with you on this one point because you're sitting there saying, oh, he's had the COVID stuff, no spring practice. Everyone was like that. Mm-hmm. Every other team was like that. Clemson was like that. Florida was like that. Pitt was like that. Louisville was like that. And Pitt kicked our ass by 24 points. Louisville, we went to their house, and they kicked our ass by 32 points. Miami, I'm sorry, Miami is a better team than we are. I would give Miami credit. Miami is a much better team than we are this season. Miami's not 42 points better than we are. That's my problem with this team right now. And then you've got Norvell sitting there in the post-game conference when he's trying to defend going for it on fourth down saying, oh, well, the percentages, our play percentages said that this is why we should go for it. This isn't high school football. This isn't Childs versus Godby. This isn't Florida High versus FAMU High. This isn't St. Thomas versus Booker T. This is college football. And you're sitting here going for it on 4th and 6 when you're still relatively somewhat in the game and you're going for it on 4th and 6? I'm sorry, it's stupid. It's stupid coaching. And Logan has said it before, and Logan is 100% right. We're trapped in a position where we're still paying a buyout for Willie. We can't get rid of this guy. And before fans jump down my throat again, I'm not saying fire him right now. But if this keeps up, we can't move on. We're trapped at this point. And that's the biggest problem, is that we've put ourselves in this position where we're trapped.
So what's the commonality between these four teams? Because you mentioned, Jason, some teams like Louisville and NC State and others that have, well, not NC State because they haven't played yet, but all the teams, Pitt and so forth, that have that aren't really good football teams, Louisville, Pitt in particular, that have clocked Florida State. And my defense was going to be, to a certain extent, I think it's valid, first-year head coaching staff, first-year head coaching staff new, trying to build the buzzword culture, build the structure, build the organization without the spring and the summer. But then I'm thinking around and I'm thinking Boston College, they seem to be doing pretty damn well. First-year head coach comes in. Arkansas, first-year head coach, a first-time head coach, Sam Pittman, had never been a head coach before, goes into a dumpster fire at Arkansas. They haven't won an SEC game in 2 or 3 years. They're doing quite well. Lane Kiffin at Ole Miss as well.
The commonality is that, and I'm just going to say it, Mike Norvell is a good coach. He was a good coach at Memphis. He managed to not sink the ship that Justin Fuente set up at Memphis, and he managed to keep that going, win their conference last year and whatnot. He is not a good Power 5 coach. I don't think he's ready to be a Power 5 coach. The same stuff you tried to do at Memphis, that may have worked against Cincinnati, that may have worked against, I'm trying to think who the hell else is in
Tulsa,
USF, Navy,
Houston, Navy.
Right. That may have worked. That's not going to work against Miami. That's not going to work against Notre Dame. It's for damn sure not going to work against Clemson in 2 weeks. I'm debating whether to even watch that game because we're going to get annihilated by Clemson. Do we even have to predict that game? Can we just predict that now? Clemson 160, Florida State 3. There's my prediction for
that. They're gonna have a second team.
Yeah, I think Trevor Lawrence might get COVID again just to see if DJ, I'm not even gonna try to pronounce his last name, can go beat Florida State by 100 points. But I don't think Mike Norvell's ready.
Yeah, and that might be true, but I want to make this statement real quick because there's a lot of things that FSU can't do that we've heard over the years. FSU couldn't afford to extend Jimbo Fisher. FSU couldn't afford to pay Taggart's buyout at Oregon. FSU couldn't afford to pay Taggart a buyout. FSU couldn't afford to pay more support staff. You know what the commonality between all those things? They figured it out. FSU can do whatever they figure out that they want to do. Now, what FSU can't, why they won't do it, and why they shouldn't, because if you're going to do it, you need to give him the adequate amount of time to succeed or to fail. You can't admit that you have egg on your face because you made a big boy move without having a big boy to replace it. And that's the truth. You don't make those moves for a group of 5 coach. I don't care what anybody wants to say, hide it, do whatever. You don't have the most aggressive booster campaign in the history of the school. Restructure all these things for a group of 5 coach. You do those for a big time coach, which is not a problem. I think Mike will be or can be the coach that FSU needs him to be. But as you talked about a lot of those other coaches, Mark, that are first-time coaches, or first-year coaches at a new school, some first-time, the difference between all of them is they come from a established coaching tree. Sam technically is from Kirby's tree, but it's attached to the Saban tree.
Mm-hmm.
Lane, besides having tons of stops that he's gone around, he's a part of the Saban tree. A lot of these guys, when the chips fall down and you get yourself into a bad spot, you have somebody that you can really go lean on, or you have an experience or somebody that you can call. So like if it were me, and what I hope the admin actually forces the hand to do, because it would be good for him. I think you got a guy like Mark Richt who's available. Instead of firing your head coach, go hire Mark as an analyst to really come in and help. And really just look at what Bama's doing and do your best job to be great value Alabama. And I don't mean like build the shrine to Alabama food court legends or whatever Nick Saban dreams up that he wants to build over there. What I mean is you have 10 on-field coaches, you have 10 analysts. You have 10 GAs or student assistants. You revamp and restructure your recruiting department. So like you've got, most schools have 10 people that are paid to work in the recruiting, whether it be in-house, off-field, helping recruit, but they have 10 paid staff and 10 student assistants. Like literally revamp all the people that are around him and give him no way that he should be able to fail. And if he still fails, you know what you've done? You've made the job attractive to anybody in the nation because they see that Florida State is at least willing to play ball. If Harbaugh gets fired at Michigan, Michigan will still be a top job because at least you know Michigan is willing to spend the bread to play ball. Harbaugh just failed. So those are the things. And I think if you keep doing these things and you build these things, you can eventually develop Coach Norvell into that coach that is necessary. But it's clear that he needs a booster seat for this job. And it's only really one place that you can compare it to and why FSU fans should be upset is when you look at what Mullen's done at Florida. I can promise you that Dan Mullen didn't say his most ideal quarterback would be to have a guy who never started a game in high school and he's going to flip him into a Heisman Trophy candidate. That's an offensive genius. But that's also having coached almost 2 decades, not less than a decade or just over a decade, which Mike Norvell has done. This is the problem with fast-tracking coaches. See, not only did Mullen do it 2 times at a group of 5 as a coordinator, he also did it as a coordinator at a Power 5 to the national championship level. And then he went to JV Power 5, Mississippi State, and developed himself at JV Power 5 to come to big-time Power 5. There was a process. When you look at, and I don't think Lane Kiffin and these guys will be successful where they're at in the long run. Sam Pittman might be, but, I don't think the other guys will. But even Lane Kiffin's got NFL experience, multiple Power 5 coaching experiences that didn't go well, rehabbed himself as an OC at a Power 5 level, went to a group of 5, made them into something, and then jumped. There was a process, and they all come from a tree. And those are the things that since we don't have the tree, we have to create the tree. And I think that's the only way that's the way you help them. And you help with recruiting, and you help solidify and stabilize the program. So, I mean, I'm not ready to fire him. I think he's going to be good. I think his energy is something that can be necessary and useful for the program. I just think we got to stop. We got to take the nipple out of this man's mouth and let him and actually treat him in the manner in which Florida State does treat them. And there's accountability, and the standard is over everything. You can't say Florida State's not a championship team, and that's okay, and then think you're going to will yourself to a championship. No, you set the course or your you set the destination, and then you map your course accordingly. You don't say, well, I wanted to go to Alaska. Well, all right, I'm in Mississippi. I'm just going to stay in Mississippi. No, Alaska's where you want to go. You take the steps to get toward Alaska no matter what until you get there.
So let's say worst case scenario, we finish 2-9. And I don't think we will, first of all. I think we win 2 more games and finish 4-7. But let's say worst case scenario, we finish 2-9. Y'all are really still ready to ride with this guy next year?
Looks 2-9 to me.
That's not really. We don't really have too much of a choice. That's number one. Number two is Florida State doesn't have a quarterback. Florida State's defensive line hasn't played. Marvin Wilson, I don't know what happened to him. If it's Odell's fault, it's Odell's fault, and you got to move on from him. This defensive line unit has been one of the most disappointing things for a whole position group that I've seen in a very long time. I kind of forget that 11's playing. I forget Lovett had his best game. Lovett was the defensive lineman. Cooper also had a good game, but the guys that you were hoping with Durden in 21 this season were not there. Some are going to be leaving. One's most certainly leaving. And it's just a complete – I also think, too, obviously that was a terrible game. Most certainly. That was awful. Jordan Travis seems like he's got a concussion. You're not able to see him in the second half. You throw James Blackman in there, which obviously a lot of the fans didn't like. I wish they weren't booing at all. I wasn't there. I didn't get to see it, or I would have been pretty ticked off at people. But they were more probably pissed at Mike Norvell making that decision, which was, I don't think Mike wanted to put Joe Purdy out there to go through hell that was about to happen. But you know what? You throw him out there, it's time to get your bruises. I just don't think Florida State, as a program, definitely in that locker room right now, there's a lot of belief in Mike Norvell for the young guys, and there is with the veterans. And right now, if I were to pick which player's side I'd want to be on, is most certainly the younger. You look back at the Jimbo Fisher last year, there's some guys that have created some bad diseases in this locker room. A lot of them that will be leaving. A lot of guys that haven't had a lot of playing time for numerous reasons. A lot of younger guys are getting playing time over these guys that have been here for 2 years. And there's reasons for that, because Chris Marv is showing or seeing different things on film and also in practice. And that's why those younger guys are starting at linebacker. I mean, there's a lot of reasons why this team is just not where it's at, but I don't think it's ready to, fire Mike Norvell. First off, you can't, not enough money. Number two, it's a long ways to go after a off season. And we're talking about other teams too. Other teams have had coaches there for years upon years. Obviously, COVID, terrible. You got to go through and not have not even a spring. You don't get a spring game. You have a little bit of fall practice. Yeah, obviously don't have a quarterback. I don't think you have a quarterback on this team that is future. Obviously, a lot of people have a lot of Purdy love. That's not me. It's Altmaier from here on out.
The
only two things I'm going to say real quick would be that, number one, we've gone on and on for weeks and weeks and months and shows about how Willie Taggart didn't get 2 full seasons, but we're calling for Mike Norvell to get fired after 7 games. Is that what we're doing? It's not even a full season yet. It's 7 games. What?
Mark, Willie Taggart Willie Taggart never went 2-5. So that's number one. Number two, Willie Taggart was 2-0 against Louisville. He didn't lose to Pitt.
So any coach who goes 2-5 gets fired, and we just established that Jimbo Fisher was 2-5 at some point, but he shouldn't be coaching anywhere.
Okay,
it's idiotic to say. First, no. Let me finish my 2 points.
Go ahead.
Point number one is that why are we talking? I am not defending the job that he's doing in any such way. The team looks awful right now. I'm not doing that. I'm just saying he shouldn't get fired after 7 freaking games. Are you kidding me? We've been talking for the last year about. Let me finish my 2 points.
No, because you're making
Let me finish my 2 points. Point number 1 is that we've been going on and on, some of us, for over a year and a half about how Willie Taggart shouldn't have been fired after 21 games. And I actually happen to believe that and agree with that. I would have given the man a 3rd year, even though I thought the football team was horrible and it was mostly his fault. I still would have given him a 3rd year. Just like I think the football team looks bad right now compared to the talent on the roster, but I would give Mike Norvell at least a 2nd year, let alone 7 games. Okay, that's point number 1. Point number 2 is I saw a few people comment in the chat that because of how bad Mike Norvell is performing, that this makes Willie Taggart look good. Okay. If I flunk a test, I get a 40 on a test. I get a 40 on a math test. Jason then goes and takes the same math test and he gets a 30. That doesn't mean I didn't flunk the freaking test. That just means that somebody else did worse or just as bad. We both flunked the test. Willie Taggart flunked. He failed. Mike Norvell is failing after 7 games, but it's only 7 games.
Mike, this FSU team, first of all, because the reason why you made me a little mad there, Mark, is because you're sitting there making up stuff that I said. I never once said that Mike Norvell should be fired after 7 games. What I have said is the constant, what I don't understand is the hypocrisy of some fans who are sitting there, I'm sorry to use this language, who are essentially slurping Mike Norvell, acting like he's the greatest person in the world, because they're still pissed off that Willie Taggart went 9-12. And you have to admit it. I know you've seen it. There's a lot of people who comment in here who basically have acted as if Willie Taggart was the Antichrist and Mike Norvell is the saint. He's the savior. No, he's not. He's proving it. Florida State did not look this bad. I'd say outside of the first game against Virginia Tech was bad, and that was a 21-point loss, and then the loss to Syracuse, which was a 30-6 loss. Those were bad losses, and then the loss to Florida at the end of the season. But a hell of a lot of those other losses were close losses. Yes, they're still losses, and I've said this before, and I'll say it again for the idiots who don't want to pay attention. Willie Taggart didn't get the job done. Willie Taggart got fired because he was 9-12. My argument is, why is everyone slurping Mike Norvell as the greatest thing in the world when he has a 2-5 record, and you cannot tell me that he has made this team look better than where they were last season when we fired Willie Taggart.
So you're apparently not talking to anybody here. You're talking to somebody in the live chat.
Oh, I'm talking.
I'm not seeing any comments defending Mike Norvell.
I think he's talking to FSU Twitter more than anything else. There are a lot of. Here's the one. I don't even like talking about coaches who aren't here anymore. But we did do it with Taggart as well. Taggart was the anti-Jimbo, and anything that Taggart said was better than what Jimbo said at that point.
Mm-hmm.
They got mad at Taggart, and now Mike Norvell is the anti-Taggart. So anything that Mike Norvell does is automatically exponentially better than what Willie Taggart did, which the case of what Jason's saying is just not true. That being said, he's here. We can fire him. Trust and believe. We shouldn't fire him because that's not how you create stability unless you really have somebody to replace him that's a big enough name to fill the void that can actually recruit talent to come in off the strength of the name, i.e. like what's the coach? I'm not saying he will come, but like the coach who just got fired, Dan Quinn. I don't know if he can coach college, but saying we're going to get Dan Quinn. That's an NFL name. That's enough to get people. That NFL coach coming from NFL to college always stirs up a little buzz and does some things. But I think Mike needs to get a chance to see it through. I just think he needs some things to help get him better into this position because his decision making is questionable at best, as well as his evaluation of talent. Even though I 100% agree with what Logan said, one of the things that people really drove down the throat all offseason was the fact that Mike Norvell recruited 2 more high school quarterbacks before he even came than the previous regime recruited the entire time. Well, what good is 2 high school quarterbacks if neither one of them can play? Jordan Travis wasn't recruited as a high school quarterback, but came over as a transfer, which bolstered your quarterback room. So those are the things. Like to me, like this is a guy who had a commit who came in and beat him. That looks exponentially better than anything that we have in our room, but he didn't make that kid feel like welcome enough for whatever people want to believe. But I'm just shocked that I thought we might have turned a corner after North Carolina, and I was optimistic and hopeful, but I also remembered the second half that I saw, and that's the scary part is that I don't know who to fire. That's the reason why I don't want to fire any of them, because I don't know who to fire. I think it's not. I personally think it's unfair to fire Fuller, because if you fire Fuller, that means you probably got to fire the entire defensive staff, because no DC is coming in and not bringing his people in. But you have an offense that has, I think, outside of Jacksonville State, and that's a thing. I'm not 100% sure, but we haven't scored. I know this. We haven't scored 21 offensive points against an FBS school. And you have an offensive guru. And if you recruited the quarterback, 2 quarterbacks that don't do what you do effectively, then that's saying more about you, because again, our rival took a guy who didn't even start. The starting quarterback for that guy's high school is the starting quarterback at the University of Miami, and he looked better than him. He basically took a kid who had it was Florida or some directional school in Arkansas, and he's got him as a Heisman contender. You've got route what makes a bad like every quarterback looks the same. I'm gonna be honest with you. When they all look the same, that's not the players. That's coaching. If everybody throws that stupid ass interception to the sideline while scrambling, at some point, that's coaching. If they all do it. It's like, again, you've got the running game is good. It's gotten better. It's not Cam Akers, but it's better. You've got pieces, but it's like you're not even taking advantage. Before Travis got hurt, you weren't even taking full advantage of the guys that of what your quarterback strength was. And if those were the 2 guys you got, and that was the high and the hype that you took to come in, you've completely killed that. So I mean, what I'm curious to know though is how does it get better, and what would he do? Like, because who would he hire that would get a spark, that would flip us guys? Who would come coach under him? And I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean, like, everybody's talking about Muschamp, and don't get me wrong, the idea of that gives me a boner, because I know what he was able to do as a DC and as a recruiter. But you're going to come up under a 38-year-old head coach and they fire coaches in 21 games at Florida State? Like, I know that's not going to happen again, but that's what's out in the coaching world. Like, you have to guarantee. It's almost like you would have to do what what LSU did with Brady and Aranda. It's almost like you would have, and really which part of the problem with the end of Taggart was what Florida State did with Bryles. To get a top-notch coordinator, you're going to have to take the head coach out of it. And that sets up a whole gang of problems afterwards, because you have literally subverted his authority. It didn't just end Taggart, it actually ended Bowden as well, when they negotiated with Jimbo outside of what Bobby had intended. So it's a lot more question marks. And You know, them press conferences in them bars that get dropped are a lot less friendly. And I even think I didn't listen to it, but I'm actually almost proud of the reputables because they're actually asking him questions and requiring answers now. And I also want to applaud. You know, I want to give a shout out to Nate. I'm gonna give your boy Nate had the. I like that. That also forced them to actually, you know, have the spotlight shine on them even more. And to the culture, that's what it has to say. Because I mean, I wouldn't have put the names out, but regardless of what it is, it put some merit in. And guess what ended up happening the next day? Not all of them, but a good solid portion are who we saw the news be about today. And what that means is that there's some stuff in there that stank and toxic. But it's not just players, it's players and coaches.
Two things real quick. Number one, Mark, I would have kicked your butt in a math quiz. Any math, I was much better than you in it.